Labour Minister skewered as GMB's Susanna Reid issues furious 5-word verdict on Starmer. Susanna Reid ripped into Keir Starmer and the Labour government as she locked horns with Wes Streeting on Good Morning Britain. Susanna Reid issued a blistering 5-word verdict on Keir Starmer as she clashed with Wes Streeting on Good Morning Britain. The Health Secretary appeared on the programme and was immediately questioned about Keir Starmer's declining poll ratings, which show he is the least popular Prime Minister on record. Rather than addressing Labour's declining popularity, the Health Secretary chose to highlight the government's achievements since taking office, including saving jobs and the introduction of free breakfast clubs. He insisted, "We've made some mistakes along the way and I suspect we'll make some mistakes in the future, but we are bringing the change to the country that we promised. There's so much more to do because the challenges are enormous." But Susanna wasn't having any of it, as she pointed out. Trouble is, he's historically the least popular Prime Minister in history. "It's just not cutting through," she declared. Ripping into the politician, Susanna continued, "You can list a whole list of what you think are your achievements. If the voters don't feel like you're delivering to them, it's not going to work, is it?" Defending the Prime Minister, Streeting responded, "What I'd say about our Prime Minister is that he is a decent man with a good heart and good values." He claimed that Keir Starmer wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, suggesting he understands what it means to struggle in life. He has come into politics because he wants to make sure that everybody in this country has a fair chance, Streeting added. Shutting him down, Susanna interjected, "Wes Streeting, forgive me, he might be the nicest person in the world, but if he's a bad Prime Minister, that's what matters to voters. And at the moment, it's as if the government keeps telling people why they should feel better off, rather than people actually feeling better off." Delivering a scathing assessment of the government, the presenter declared, "We've got a budget coming down the line, where people are just petrified of tax rises, that VAT might go up, that you might tweak the wording again on your manifesto and break commitments. Until you make people feel better off, you're not getting a message through about how good you are at governing." Good Morning Britain has never been a quiet arena. It is a gladiatorial pit disguised as a breakfast show, where the clink of teaspoons and the steam of coffee mugs mask the political sparring that defines Britain's morning mood. And on this particular broadcast, it was Labour's turn under the unforgiving lights. The guest, a mid-ranking Labour minister sent to defend Sir Keir Starmer's latest policy U-turn, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The studio was calm, the set polished, but the air had the static charge of confrontation. Across the desk sat Susanna Reid, whose reputation for surgical questioning has made cabinet ministers sweat and shadow ministers crumble. This morning would prove no different. The segment began innocently enough. The minister, leaning slightly forward, tried to present Labour as the party of competence, the grown-ups ready to take over after years of conservative turbulence. But the veneer cracked quickly. Reid's first question was deceptively polite. "Minister, if Sir Keir says one thing in March and the opposite in September, how can the public believe anything he says at all?" The minister blinked. His lips curled into a rehearsed half-smile. He launched into a ramble about changing economic circumstances and responsible leadership. Reid didn't move. Her eyes, steady as a hawk's, bored into him. She let him finish, then pounced. "But isn't that just another way of saying he changes his mind whenever it suits him?" The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they sliced through the politician's armor. Viewers at home felt it instantly. This wasn't going to be an interview, it was going to be a dismantling. The minister fumbled. He reached for the safe phrase, "We've been clear," but Reid cut in, her voice firm but not raised. "No, you haven't been clear. You've been contradictory. And the public aren't stupid." It was the moment the interview turned. Twitter would later light up with clips, memes, and looping gifs of Reid raising her eyebrow as the minister squirmed. But the true gut punch came when she distilled her frustration into a furious 5-word verdict on the Labour leader himself. With the nation watching, she leaned forward slightly and said, "Starmer just doesn't convince, does he?" 5 words, framed as a question, but really a verdict. The studio fell into a hush that only live television can create. The minister tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out brittle, like glass under pressure. He began another rambling defense, invoking real leadership and hard choices. But Reid wasn't finished. She listed, one by one, the broken promises and shifting pledges. Tuition fees, green investment, workers' rights. Each item was like a nail hammered into a coffin. The minister's face paled. His voice grew thinner. Viewers at home, already skeptical of politicians, found themselves nodding. Social media erupted with praise for Reid's bluntness. One commenter wrote, "Finally, someone on TV saying what we're all thinking." Another quipped, "Forget Starmer. Susanna Reid should run for PM." The minister looked as though he'd stumbled into a lion's den armed only with a paper shield. His eyes darted toward the clock, hoping for the segment to end, but time dragged cruelly. Reid pressed on. "You talk about credibility, but credibility is earned by consistency. Sir Keir says one thing to get applause and another when the applause fades. People don't know who he is. Do you know who he is?" The minister's answer, "Of course, he's the leader of the Labour Party," was met with a silence so heavy that it drew a chuckle from viewers. It was the silence of contempt, a silence that made the minister's defense collapse under its own hollowness. At home, the audience could feel it. Reid was not just grilling a minister, she was articulating a wider disillusionment. Starmer had promised renewal, honesty, and clarity, but for many voters he remained a puzzle with missing pieces. Reid's 5 words crystallized that unease into something unforgettable. The fallout was immediate. Headlines spread before the show had even finished. Susanna Reid eviscerates Labour minister in brutal clash. GMB viewers applaud host's 5-word slam of Starmer. Labour in crisis as media attacks intensify. By mid-morning, Labour HQ was in panic mode. Spin doctors scrambled to flood the airwaves with rebuttals, but the clip was already viral. No amount of post-interview damage control could erase Reid's piercing question from the public consciousness. In Westminster, Tory MPs chuckled gleefully in WhatsApp groups, circulating the video with giddy captions. For them, Reid had done what their attack ads often failed to: expose Labour's weakness in language that resonated with ordinary people. Yet the true sting lay not in partisan gloating but in the reaction of Labour supporters themselves. Many admitted, often reluctantly, that Reid had put words to their own doubts. One lifelong Labour voter tweeted, "I want to back Keir, but Susanna is right, he just doesn't convince." Another wrote, "If he can't even survive Reid, how will he survive a general election campaign?" As the minister stumbled out of the studio later, reporters swarmed him with microphones. His answers were weary, rehearsed. But the story was already set. He had been skewered live on air, and the weapon had been 5 words sharp enough to wound an entire party's image. Susanna Reid herself, back in the studio, moved briskly to the next segment, a feature on rising food prices. But she knew, as did everyone else, that her 5-word strike would echo far beyond breakfast television. In the days that followed, think pieces appeared across newspapers. Commentators debated whether Reid had simply captured public sentiment or whether she had actively reshaped it. Some accused her of bias, of wielding her platform too aggressively. Others applauded her courage, arguing that journalists exist precisely to cut through political spin. But to the average viewer, the analysis was beside the point. The moment felt authentic, unscripted, and raw, qualities so rare in political discourse that they burned into the collective memory. And for Labour, the damage was undeniable. Starmer's team could roll out policies, stage rallies, and rehearse soundbites, but in the back of every voter's mind lingered the host's withering question: does he convince? 5 words, spoken in a morning studio, had become a test Starmer would struggle to pass. Because sometimes, in politics, it isn't a manifesto that defines you, or a policy paper, or a carefully staged speech. Sometimes it's the split-second verdict of a journalist, delivered without fanfare, that lodges itself in the national psyche.